Darren Cole didn't believe in second chances. Not after burying his wife of 12 years in a rainy Cleveland cemetery, and definitely not after watching his house sit in silence for months, still filled with the scent of her shampoo and the ghost of her laughter. But grief has a strange way of softening over time, dulling into a numb ache that makes a man crave warmth again. Any warmth, even if it comes wrapped in mystery. That's exactly what he felt the first time he met Maribel Hart. She wasn't the kind of woman who demanded attention when she entered a room. She moved like she was born to avoid the spotlight. Graceful but quiet, her voice always just a few decibels below the noise. Darren noticed her at the back of the St. Agnes Church one Sunday morning, sitting alone in a pew, fingers clasped together so tightly he could see the whites in her knuckles. She looked like a widow, and later he found out she was. Or so he thought. Maribel lived in a charming craftsman-style house tucked away at the end of Beechwood Lane. It was the kind of place people walked past and said, "That's a storybook home," with ivy growing up the columns and a red door that always seemed freshly painted. Darren had been called there for an electrical inspection, one of those quick handyman jobs he did part-time after leaving his construction gig. The breaker was old, sure, but what caught his attention wasn't the wiring. It was the woman offering him sweet tea while he worked. Maribel, barefoot, in a flowy blue dress. Her eyes sad but polite. She told him she'd lost her husband, Jonathan, 5 years ago in a hiking accident in Colorado. A freak storm, she said. The rescue team never found his body. He'd slipped, maybe fallen into a ravine. All she had left was a wedding band and a closed casket service. She told the story with a hollowed-out voice, as if she'd said it too many times already, like repeating it would somehow make it hurt less. Darren didn't press. Their connection was quiet, uncomplicated, and maybe that's why it felt safe. He wasn't looking for fireworks, just someone to have dinner with, someone who wouldn't flinch at silence. They started with walks around her garden, then the lake nearby. By month 3, he was spending the night. By month 5, he'd moved in. At month 6, they were married. His friends called it fast. His sister warned him he was running from grief by diving into something he didn't understand. But Darren felt something he hadn't in years: peace, stability, a kind of domestic calm he'd once thought impossible to rebuild. But even in paradise, the walls whisper. The first time he heard it, he just finished fixing a leaky faucet in the guest bathroom. It was late, and Maribel had gone to bed early, her migraines acting up again. As he walked past the hallway near the laundry room, he heard it, a soft thump like something shifting inside the wall. Then a faint scraping sound like fingernails against wood. He froze. The house was old. Maybe it was the pipes. Maybe a squirrel had gotten in through the attic. He told himself that once, twice, but it kept happening. Thump, scrape, a faint moan, maybe. It was always at night, always in the same spot, just past the hallway closet, where the wall seemed a little thicker than it should be. One night, he pressed his palm against the drywall and swore he could feel warmth radiating from within, like a slow heartbeat. He told Maribel. She laughed, light and airy, but her eyes didn't join in. "This house has character," she said. "It talks sometimes. You'll get used to it." Then she kissed him softly and changed the subject. But Darren couldn't let it go. Not because he was paranoid, but because he was an electrician. He understood walls, stud spacing, pipe placement, sound travel. This wasn't normal. He started keeping notes. Times, sounds, patterns. He even downloaded a decibel meter app on his phone and measured it. The noise peaked between 2 and 4 a.m. Like clockwork. Still, he didn't act. Because love has a funny way of overriding logic. And because Maribel always smelled like lavender when she curled up next to him at night, and he wanted so badly for her to be exactly who she said she was. Until one night, when he heard something that changed everything. Not a thump, not a scratch, not even a moan, but a voice. Low, raspy, desperate. And it said his name. Darren didn't sleep that night. How could he, after hearing his own name whispered through solid drywall? At first, he thought he was imagining it. He lay still in bed, heart pounding, eyes open in the dark. The ceiling fan hummed gently overhead, Mary Bell breathing softly beside him. The house was quiet now, too quiet. But that voice, his name, spoken slow and strained, like it hurt just to say it, still echoed in his ears. The next morning, over coffee, he stared at Mary Bell like she was an unsolved puzzle. She wore her silk robe, hair in a loose bun, humming as she cut strawberries for their cereal. Nothing about her said, woman with secrets. And maybe that's what scared him more than anything else. How normal everything seemed. How easily she smiled. Did you sleep okay? She asked without looking up. Darren hesitated. I thought I heard something again. Near the hallway. Mary Bell paused for half a second, just long enough for him to notice, then turned back to the bowl. These old houses, you know how they settle. He nodded, pretending to agree. But that pause, it wasn't nothing. That afternoon, after she went out for her weekly nail appointment, Darren pulled his toolbox from the garage. He wasn't about to tell her what he was doing. Not yet. Something in his gut said to move carefully, like whatever he was tiptoeing around had claws. He walked back to the hallway and knelt in front of the wall between the laundry room and the old guest closet. That's where the sound had come from. That's where the voice had said, Darren, help. He knocked. Once. Twice. Nothing. Then he put his ear against the wall. Silence. He closed his eyes and stayed there for a long minute, just breathing, listening. Then, so faint it might have been a dream, he heard it again. Please. He jerked back, nearly dropping the flashlight. This wasn't rodents. This wasn't pipes. Someone was in there. He grabbed his phone, opened his inspection camera kit. A small, flexible camera he'd used hundreds of times to snake through tight spaces. He found a spot near the baseboard behind a loose panel of trim and fed the camera inside. At first, just darkness. Dust. Old wood framing. But as he angled the lens upward, the light caught on something unnatural. A piece of fabric. Brown. Faded. Torn. He pushed further. Another shape. Pale. Rounded. Then the screen on his phone showed what looked unmistakably like a human hand, trembling, with dirt caked under the nails. He pulled back quickly, heart racing so loud he could barely hear. He stumbled back from the wall, breath ragged, gripping the phone like it might break in his palm. He had to call the police. But just as he reached for the phone, he heard the front door. Mary Bell was home. Hey, babe, she called out cheerfully. I picked up some Thai for lunch. Darren stood frozen in the hallway, still clutching the inspection camera like a weapon. He slid the trim back into place, hands shaking. He couldn't let her see. Not yet. He walked into the kitchen slowly. Mary Bell unpacked containers of green curry and jasmine rice, smiling like nothing in the world was wrong. You okay? She asked, noticing his pale face. You look like you've seen a ghost. Darren forced a laugh, the sound hollow in his throat. Just tired. Didn't sleep well. She kissed him on the cheek, warm and soft. You need to rest more, she said gently. Your mind plays tricks when you don't. He nodded, but something in her voice made his stomach turn. That night, he didn't go to sleep. He waited. When Mary Bell took her usual sleeping pills and drifted off, Darren crept out of bed and went back to the hallway. This time he brought his crowbar. He pried open the drywall slowly, carefully, trying not to make too much noise. The moment the first chunk came loose, the stench hit him. Foul, damp, something between rot and mold. He gagged but kept going. Behind the drywall was a false space. A hollow chamber that wasn't on any blueprint. Maybe 4 feet wide, 8 feet tall. just enough room to stand up in, barely. The air was thick, humid, wrong. And then he saw him. A man, gaunt, barely skin and bone, eyes sunken so deep they looked like shadows. His arms were bound at the wrists with thick nylon cord, his lips cracked and bleeding. His skin was gray, but he was breathing shallow, barely but breathing. Darren dropped the crowbar. The man blinked slowly, like it took all the energy he had just to do that. Then, with a rasp so raw it sounded inhuman, he whispered, "She put me here." Darren stumbled back in shock, one hand flying to his mouth, the other already reaching for his phone. The man tried to speak again, but his body gave out. He slumped forward, unconscious. Sirens didn't take long. When the paramedics arrived, they had to cut a larger hole just to pull him out. He was severely dehydrated, malnourished, and suffering from advanced muscle atrophy. His name was Jonathan Hart, Mary Bell's husband, the man who was supposed to be dead. The news hit Darren like a brick to the chest. Jonathan Hart, alive, the man Mary Bell had mourned, the man she'd lit candles for every anniversary, the man whose death she'd woven into the very fabric of their marriage. His name was now echoing through the emergency room, attached to a body that looked more corpse than human, but somehow hadn't let go. Darren stood in the hospital hallway, arms crossed, still coated in drywall dust, as nurses wheeled Jonathan away. A detective had already arrived, Detective Raymond Cruz, a tired-looking man in his 50s with a permanent frown and a notepad that never seemed to close. "You're sure it's him?" Cruz asked Darren flatly. "I saw their wedding photo," Darren said, voice hollow. "It's him, just less of him." Cruz nodded slowly, like he already knew this case was going to be a nightmare. By the time they returned to the house on Beechwood Lane, Mary Bell was gone. No car in the driveway. No answer at the door. The curtains were drawn, the porch light flicked off. Inside, the house was exactly as Darren had left it, except emptier. Her purse was missing. So was her overnight bag. She'd run. That night, Darren sat on the living room couch with a blanket draped over his shoulders and 2 cups of untouched tea on the coffee table. Cruz walked the perimeter of the house, making notes, snapping pictures, shaking his head every 5 minutes. It wasn't just the hidden compartment in the wall. It was what they found inside it that chilled everyone to their core. A bucket, soiled sheets, empty water bottles, protein bars expired years ago, a cracked baby monitor, likely used by Mary Bell to listen in without opening the wall, a journal written in Jonathan's handwriting, the pages barely legible, smeared with blood and tears. It wasn't just confinement. It was slow-burn torture. She'd kept him alive, just enough to suffer. Over the next few days, the story exploded. News vans parked outside the neighborhood. Neighbors whispered over hedges. Talk shows speculated wildly. They dubbed her the Widow Maker. Some called it a case of psychosis. Others whispered words like sociopath, Black Widow, and monster in pearls. But Darren couldn't stop thinking about the nights they'd spent together. The way she laughed at his dumb jokes. The way she pressed her hand to his chest while they danced in the kitchen. The way she cried the night he proposed. Had it all been an act? Detective Cruz didn't think so. "She's not crazy," Cruz said one night, leaning against the fireplace mantel while crime scene techs snapped photos. "Not in the way people think. She planned this. She built that chamber. She sealed it, soundproofed it. You know how rare that kind of control is in these cases." Darren nodded, staring down at his hands. "People don't fake grief that well," he murmured. "I held her while she sobbed for him. She probably cried for herself." Cruz replied coldly. "Not him." At the hospital, Jonathan woke up on the 4th day. He was heavily sedated but lucid. He couldn't speak for long. His vocal cords had atrophied, but what he could say changed everything. "I caught her cheating," he whispered, his voice barely audible through the oxygen mask. Told her I was leaving. That night, I woke up in the dark. He tried to fight her off, but she drugged him. When he woke again, he was inside the wall. She fed him through a small flap hidden behind a fake outlet. Kept him sedated on and off, depending on her mood. Sometimes she wouldn't visit for days. Sometimes she'd sit just outside the wall and talk to him, read books aloud like nothing was wrong. When he begged her to let him out, she'd say, "You broke your vows. This is your penance." 5 years, trapped in the dark, hearing the world go on without him, hearing her move on, marrying someone else, living her second life while he wasted away, inch by inch. Darren didn't know how to process it. He started drinking coffee at 2 a.m., stopped sleeping in their bed. He found himself staring at the closet where the wall once was, as if it might speak to him again, as if it might offer closure. Instead, he found something else, a flash drive, taped beneath the bottom drawer of her vanity. Inside were dozens of audio files, recordings, Maribel talking, singing, whispering. Some were gentle, almost loving. "You were always mine, Jonathan." Others were cruel. What does it feel to be the secret now? And some weren't to Jonathan at all. Darren's sweet. He reminds me of you, but softer, easier to control. Darren's blood went cold. She had been planning to do it again. It was the calm before another storm. Except this time, Darren knew it was coming. And it was wearing the face of a woman he once kissed goodnight. Maribel was still missing. For a week, the police chased dead ends. She'd left behind her cell phone, wiped clean. Her bank accounts were untouched. Her car had been abandoned at a rest stop 2 towns over. No security footage, no witnesses. Just a lipstick-stained coffee cup left in the passenger seat, and a note scribbled on the back of a grocery receipt. You were never supposed to find him. Detective Cruz sat across from Darren in the station's dimly lit interview room, holding the note between 2 gloved fingers. "This wasn't panic," he said flatly. "She's not running scared. She's running smart." Darren had already read the note 6 times. He didn't need to see it again to feel the way his stomach twisted. "She had a plan," he muttered. "She always had a plan." Meanwhile, the recordings from the flash drive were being dissected by the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit. They confirmed what Cruz had suspected from the beginning. Maribel was methodical. Cold. She didn't act out of rage or impulse. She built layers of lies, nesting her reality inside fantasies until even the people closest to her couldn't tell what was real. One recording, time-stamped just weeks before Darren moved in, chilled him to the core. "I think he's falling for me, just like the first one. Men always fall for the story, for the broken woman who needs saving." Her voice was warm, playful. "Jonathan never appreciated what we had, but Darren will, until he doesn't." They also found architectural drawings on her laptop, hidden under an encrypted folder, plans for a new compartment behind the wall in the master bedroom. Bigger, deeper, designed to be entirely soundproof. The file was titled Forever 2. It didn't take a genius to figure out who that was meant for. "She was going to do it to me," Darren said aloud one night, alone in his living room, replaying the audio on loop. "She was already building my coffin, inside my own damn house." Jonathan, meanwhile, remained in the hospital under psychiatric observation. He refused visitors except for Cruz, and even then, only spoke in short, fragmented sentences. But what he did say painted a picture far darker than anyone had expected. "She liked the quiet," he whispered. "She said it was pure. Said if I screamed enough, eventually I'd forget how." He remembered Maribel describing the soundproofing in detail, repeating it like scripture. Double stud wall, mineral wool insulation, 2 layers of drywall with acoustic glue. That wasn't grief talking. That was obsession, engineering, control. Maribel hadn't just wanted Jonathan to disappear. She wanted him to be forgotten. The case went national. Talk shows brought on psychologists to debate what kind of trauma could create a woman like Maribel Hart. Twitter blew up with hashtags. Hashtag Widowmaker. Hashtag Beechwood Burial. Hashtag Trapped Alive. But none of it felt real to Darren. None of it changed the fact that he'd shared a bed with a woman who once calmly recorded herself saying, "Love isn't about freedom. It's about belonging, even if you have to be nailed into it." He couldn't stay in the house anymore. Every time the floorboards creaked, he flinched. Every time the wind passed through the old vents, he imagined a voice behind the wall whispering his name. He packed a single suitcase and left everything else behind: clothes, tools, framed photos. He didn't want to carry any piece of that life with him. It all felt tainted. But before he left, he walked into the hidden chamber one last time. The space had been gutted by the forensics team, stripped of every trace of its grotesque purpose. Still, he stood in the center and closed his eyes. And he whispered, "You survived. For Jonathan. For himself. And maybe, in some twisted way, for the next man she might have chosen." The FBI issued a nationwide bolo. Her face appeared on America's Most Wanted. They suspected she'd dyed her hair, changed her name, maybe even crossed the border. But Darren didn't think she was running. He thought she was watching. He could feel her out there, silent, patient, waiting for someone else to fall in love with his story. 6 weeks passed with no sign of Maribel. She seemed to vanish into thin air, leaving behind nothing but whispers and nightmares. The FBI followed every lead: possible sightings in Kansas, a tip from a gas station clerk in Louisiana, a woman matching her description buying bleach and rope at a Walmart in Arizona. Nothing panned out. Every lead ended in someone else. Every clue felt like a ghost. But Darren couldn't move on. He tried. He really did. He rented a one-bedroom apartment in a new town with no picket fences, no red doors, no damn false walls. He started therapy, stopped drinking coffee after midnight, got a dog from the shelter, a pit mix named Luna who barked at every creak in the floor like she could still smell something rotten in his past. And yet, every time he closed his eyes, he was back in that house, back in that hallway, hearing his name from behind the drywall. One morning, he woke up in a cold sweat after dreaming of Maribel. She wasn't screaming. She wasn't running. She was just smiling, standing in the dark, whispering the same phrase over and over again. "You were supposed to stay in the story." That's when the postcard arrived. No return address. No handwriting. Just a printed photo of a small lake somewhere in Montana. On the back, one line typed in red: "You always like the quiet, Darren." His chest tightened. His hands trembled. He turned the card over and scanned it again and again, looking for any clue, any mark. It was clean, surgical, cold, just like her. He took it straight to Cruz. The detective studied the card with the same tired frown he wore on day one. "She's not taunting," he muttered. "She's warning you." "Warning me about what?" Cruz didn't answer. He just slid the card into an evidence bag and said, "We need to go talk to Jonathan again." Jonathan had been moved to a state-run rehabilitation center with 24/7 supervision. His recovery was slow, painful. He still couldn't walk without assistance. But his mind was sharper than anyone expected. When Darren and Cruz entered his room, he looked up with eyes that had seen too much darkness and still hadn't adjusted to the light. "She sent something, didn't she?" he asked before anyone said a word. Darren nodded. Jonathan exhaled deeply, then closed his eyes. "Then she's getting ready to do it again." They asked him what he meant. "She doesn't kill like you think," he said, voice raw. "She erases. First the body, then the identity, then the memory. She doesn't want a grave. She wants silence." He told them more that day. Things he hadn't said before, things too painful to admit when he was barely able to breathe. Like how, during the first months of his captivity, Mary Bell would come to the wall and read him bedtime stories. Fairy tales, but they were always altered. In her version, the princess locked the prince away. She didn't want him to fight dragons or save kingdoms. She just wanted him to stay. She called it love, he whispered, but it was ownership. She's picking her next story, Cruz muttered under his breath, and she wants Darren to know it. The FBI ramped up efforts. They released an updated age-progressed image, adjusted for weight loss, hair dye, contact lenses. They pushed it to every local station in Montana, Wyoming, the Dakotas. Nothing. Not a single confirmed sighting. Until one day, a ranger from a remote forest outpost called in. A woman matching Mary Bell's new description had rented a secluded cabin 3 weeks ago. Paid cash. Drove a nondescript gray sedan. Alone, as far as he could tell. The ranger didn't think much of it, until he saw her sitting by the lake one morning, talking to someone who wasn't there. He heard her say, "Don't worry, I'll never let them hurt you again." That was all the FBI needed. A tactical unit raided the cabin just before sunrise. What they found inside wasn't a hostage. It was a mannequin, life-sized, dressed in a navy polo shirt and khakis, with a face molded to resemble Darren. And in the corner of the cabin, a brand new, half-constructed wall, framing, drywall, insulation stacked neatly. She was building again, but she was gone. All that remained was a journal, spiral-bound, pages soaked with water damage, but still legible in places. It was written in second person, addressed directly to you. Every page was a monologue, a delusion. You understood me. You never judged me. You saw the truth beneath my skin. They're trying to take you away, but I won't let them. Not again. Never again. And then, in all caps, circled 3 times. I am not a monster. I am a keeper. The page after that was blank. So was the next, and the next. And somewhere in that silence, Darren felt her disappear again. Not caught. Not dead. Just gone. Vanishing like smoke behind a wall. The trial was never supposed to happen. Not without her. But even in her absence, the courtroom filled. People wanted answers. Closure. Blood. Something. The prosecution didn't have a defendant in the chair, but they had evidence. And in America, sometimes that's enough to put a ghost on trial. The state charged Mary Bell Hart in absentia with attempted murder, unlawful imprisonment, aggravated assault, and psychological torture. It was a legal performance as much as it was a proceeding. Cameras lined the walls. True crime podcasts camped outside the courthouse. Every news cycle began with the same chilling soundbite from Jonathan Hart. She locked me inside my own home, and the world kept spinning without me. Jonathan testified on day 3, wheeled into the witness box under heavy protection. He didn't cry, didn't flinch, just told the truth in a voice too quiet for anyone to feel comfortable. He described the early days when he thought it was a prank, then a punishment, then a waking death. He told the jury how she fed him through a slit in the wall like a zoo animal, how she read to him, sometimes naked, sometimes crying, always calling it love, how she punished him with silence, days of it, weeks, how his muscles stopped working, how he began to forget his own name. They talk about solitary confinement like it's punishment, he said, eyes locked straight ahead. But when you're buried alive and still have to listen to your captor brush her teeth on the other side of the wall, that's not punishment. That's madness with a schedule. The courtroom went silent. Darren didn't testify. He sat in the back row every day, stiff in his chair, jaw clenched, barely blinking. Everyone wanted a statement. Every reporter wanted a story. But he refused to become the main character in a narrative Mary Bell had already written for him. She wanted me to be the sequel, he told Cruz over coffee one night. I won't give her that. Instead, he watched as audio files were played for the court. Recordings from the flash drive. Her voice, soft and syrupy, filled the courtroom like a haunting lullaby. I don't kill, I preserve. He didn't leave me. He just stopped being useful above ground. Love isn't freedom. It's containment. It's walls. It's forever. Darren remembered a night, long before the wall, when they lay tangled in bed, and she told him a story from her childhood, quietly, like a secret she wasn't sure she wanted to share. My parents used to lock me in the crawl space when I cried, she'd said, eyes fixed on the ceiling. Said it was the only way to teach me quiet. He'd kissed her forehead, thinking it was a sad memory. But now, with everything he knew, he wondered if it was something else entirely. A blueprint. She had learned young that silence wasn't punishment. It was power. Jurors stared in horror. Some wept. One had to step outside during playback of the final tape, a long, uninterrupted recording of Marybelle singing an old hymn while hammering something. The rhythmic banging echoed through the room, slow and steady, like a metronome of madness. The prosecution rested. The defense, what little there was, argued she was mentally unfit to stand trial, that her actions stemmed from deep psychosis, that the absence of her body meant the trial was meaningless. But the jury didn't buy it. On the 12th day, they returned a unanimous verdict. Guilty on all counts. It was the strangest sentencing in state history. Punishment without a prisoner. The judge read her sentence aloud anyway, as if somewhere in the dark, she might be listening. Marybelle Hart is hereby sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, he declared. Should she be apprehended, her place awaits. Jonathan exhaled, a breath 5 years in the making. But Darren felt no relief. Justice, it seemed, didn't make the nightmares go away. That night, he returned to his apartment, fed Luna, locked the doors 3 times, checked every vent, every cabinet. He even knocked on the walls, once just to be sure. Silence. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that somewhere out there she was watching, waiting, because monsters don't always need cages. Sometimes they build them. Darren hoped the verdict would close a door. Instead, it only widened the hallway in his mind, the one that always led back to the wall. Each night after the trial, sleep came slower. Each sound in the house felt louder. And Marybelle, somehow, felt closer. 3 months later, the nightmares hadn't stopped. Darren tried everything, therapy, EMDR, even experimental sleep treatments. But no matter what he did, the dreams always returned. Not with violence, not with blood, but with stillness. He'd be standing in that hallway again, the one from Beechwood Lane, facing the wall. Behind it, silence. Not screaming, not crying, just the weight of something alive, waiting to be noticed. And then, knock, knock, knock. Always 3 times. Always just before he woke up, soaked in sweat. Luna would whimper at his bedside on those nights, ears perked, eyes locked on the same spot in the wall where Darren swore he once heard his name. Reality blurred sometimes. He would pass a woman in the grocery store with similar hair, catch a scent of lavender in a department store. Once in traffic, a gray sedan 2 cars ahead braked slightly too long at a green light, and his hands trembled so violently on the wheel he had to pull over and vomit. Everyone told him she was probably dead, that the wilderness wasn't forgiving, that someone like her couldn't live off the grid forever. But Darren knew better. She didn't live off the grid. She lived in the seams. And people like Marybelle didn't just disappear. They simmered. Then, in early October, the news broke again. A realtor in Wisconsin went to show a foreclosed lake house. It was supposed to be routine, but inside, she found something chilling. The wall in the master bedroom had been partially reconstructed. Fresh insulation, half-finished drywall, and embedded inside, an old baby monitor still powered on, with audio playing on loop. A woman's voice whispering, "You'll never leave me again." The real estate agent fled. The FBI arrived hours later. The house had been rented under a fake name. No fingerprints. No DNA. But the handwriting in the notebook left on the kitchen table matched Mary Bell Hart's exactly. One page was addressed to Jonathan. Another to Darren. I was too soft with him. I won't make the same mistake twice. They found mannequins again, 2 this time. 1 male, 1 female. Positioned like they were dancing. Eyes painted wide open. Lips glued shut. It wasn't just obsession anymore. It was rehearsal. Darren stared at the crime scene photos Cruz emailed him and felt something shift in his gut. This wasn't over. He tried to go about his life. He picked up jobs again, rewired an old barn, helped a friend build a nursery. For a few days, it even felt normal, until he received the package. No label, no return address, just a cardboard box left at his door. Inside, a single red brick, wrapped in lace, and underneath it a note. You were supposed to stay in the wall. His hands went numb. His heart skipped. He called Cruz. They ran prints. Nothing. They traced the lace. Custom made, ordered anonymously from an online vintage fabric shop based in Oregon. Shipped to a P.O. box rented under the name M. Hallow. Too clean. Too careful. She wasn't taunting him anymore. She was reminding him that the story never really ended. That walls may get torn down and houses may be sold, but the design always remains. The FBI placed Darren under protective surveillance. Cameras, motion detectors, a panic button installed by his bed. But no one could protect him from what he saw when he closed his eyes. Not anymore, because now, when he dreamed, the wall was no longer sealed. It was open, and she was standing in it, smiling, holding a hammer, whispering, "Forever means forever." He started sleeping with the lights on, kept a crowbar next to the bed, quit his job, moved again, changed his number, but dread followed like static. Mary Bell didn't need to be in the room to haunt it. She was in his walls, in his thoughts, in his blueprints, and somewhere, Darren knew, she was building again. Winter came early that year. Snow blanketed everything in Darren's new town, clean, quiet, blinding white. He'd moved again, this time to upstate New York, remote enough that even the wind sounded unfamiliar. No neighbors within shouting distance. Just an old cottage surrounded by forest. With thick stone walls and a heavy wooden door, he reinforced himself. He didn't tell anyone where he went. Not Cruz, not Jonathan, not even his sister. He wanted to disappear before she found him again. But deep down, he knew it didn't matter. She'd find him anyway. That was the thing about Mary Bell Hart. She didn't chase people. She waited. She watched. She built. And Darren? He wasn't a man anymore. Not really. He was a floor plan with legs. Every creak in the house set him on edge. He'd knock on walls, measure thicknesses, count studs. He slept with a flashlight under his pillow, and the crowbar never left his side. Luna had aged faster since the move, gray around the eyes, growling at shadows that shouldn't have moved. And then one night, she disappeared, gone when he woke. No paw prints in the snow, no sign of a struggle, no door left open. Just her collar sitting neatly at the edge of the hallway, right in front of a wall Darren knew had been solid the day before. He dropped to his knees and ran his hands along the drywall. Nothing gave. No hidden seams. No draft. No clue. But in his gut, something twisted. The next day, he drove into town, walked into the sheriff's office and asked, very calmly, how much it would cost to tear down and rebuild a house from the inside out. Stud by stud, beam by beam. When they stared at him, he just smiled politely and walked back out. That night, he didn't sleep. Instead, he sat in the hallway, right where Luna's collar had been, and waited. Hours passed. Darkness pressed in. The wind howled through the trees outside. Then he heard it. Tap, tap, tap. 3 soft knocks from behind the wall. He didn't scream. Didn't move. He just whispered, "What do you want?" Silence. Then a breath. Not his. A breath from inside the wall. And then, "I missed you." He bolted from the house at dawn. Left everything behind. The dishes still in the sink. The furnace still running. He didn't care. He drove south. No plan. No destination. Just movement. Because walls can't hold what can't be found. 2 weeks later, a hunter stumbled upon the house, still warm with power, but completely empty. Except for one thing. A new wall. Fresh plaster. Untouched paint. Seamless. Inside it, authorities found a life-size sculpture made of mannequin parts and clay. A man, kneeling, eyes closed, arms wrapped around
changed
a
his
dog.
name.
Both
Grew a
sealed
beard,
inside.
lived in motels,
The media exploded.
paid cash,
Again.
trusted no one.
And again.
But no matter where
she
he
was
went,
nowhere. The walls
the
were
FBI
never
called it
just
symbolic.
walls.
A
And
sick
at night,
joke,
when
proof
everything
that
was
she was
quiet
alive
and
and
the
still
world
watching.
seemed almost
But Darren
safe
knew
again.
better.
It
He'd
wasn't
hear
a
her,
message,
not screaming.
It was a draft,
not yelling,
an
just
architectural
humming.
sketch
Behind a plaster,
a model,
waiting for
and
a
a real
story to
version
start
was still
again.
coming. The FBI combed through the sculpture in the wall, analyzing every material used. Latex skin paint, synthetic hair, strands glued meticulously along the scalp of the mannequin. The eyes were crafted from real glass, imported from Italy. The stitching along the dog's fur was done by hand. This wasn't a message sent in haste. It was obsession curated. And yet, what rattled the investigators most wasn't the craftsmanship. It was the photo, tucked behind the mannequin's ear, folded twice. A Polaroid, taken in front of a completely different house. A Victorian in Georgia. Pale yellow siding, black shutters, and standing at the porch, a man in his 30s, smiling, clueless. Behind him, partially obscured by the doorframe, was a woman, her face blurred, but her posture unmistakable. Maribel, and the timestamp? Only 2 weeks old. She was already scripting her next story. Cruz called Darren the same night. "You're not the only one," he said, his voice flat. "She's running multiples now, testing new layouts, different personalities." Darren went still. "You're saying she's repeating it? With someone else?" "No," Cruz replied quietly. "I'm saying she's perfecting it." They traced the house in the photo. The man in it was named Elias Brooks. No criminal record. Freelance graphic designer. Single. Recently divorced. New to town. When the FBI knocked on his door, there was no answer. The house was dark. Inside, they found signs of recent construction. Tools. Sheetrock dust. A second bedroom stripped to its studs. And one wall fully sealed. But when they opened it, they found nothing. No body. No mannequin. No writing. Just a small plaque nailed inside the wall center. Burned into the wood were 4 words. This one got away. Back in his motel room, Darren stared at the news alert, feeling both relief and dread crash together in his chest. She was escalating, changing. He wasn't her only story anymore, but he might still be her favorite. That night, he had the dream again, but it was different. He wasn't standing in the hallway. He was inside the wall. Darkness pressed on all sides. The air was thick. The silence wasn't silent at all. It breathed. Then came a knock. 1, 2, 3. Then her voice behind him this time. Soft, gentle, like a lullaby soaked in poison. "I never wanted you to leave, but I'll let you run for now. You always come back to me, Darren. You were built for walls." He woke up gasping, and that's when he heard it. From the other side of the motel's paper-thin wall. Tap, tap, tap. He froze, sweat pouring down his back. He pressed his ear to the plaster. Silence. Then, "I see you." He grabbed his bag and fled before sunrise. He changed motels twice that week, slept in his truck, deleted his phone again. But no matter where he went, it followed. Not her, not physically, but the architecture of her. Every room felt like it had too many corners. Every mirror felt like it might hold her reflection if he stared long enough. Every silence felt curated, tailored just for him. At a rest stop in rural Missouri, Darren entered the bathroom and found something waiting in the last stall. Not Marybelle, not a note, but a drawing, scratched into the metal with a house key or a knife. A crude blueprint. It was of a wall. Measurements. Materials. A chamber just large enough for one person. And at the bottom, signed in jagged, looping script, Forever 3. Somewhere, in some forgotten cabin, or an abandoned basement, or behind a wall that hadn't yet been built, Marybelle Hart was preparing her next masterpiece. Brick by brick, breath by breath,